Good evening. I'm Cynthia Carell. I am the New York State National Committee woman to the National Democratic Lawyers Council, and I am also one of the co-chairs for the Long Island region. And my question to you involves voter protection. There is currently a bill making its way through the New York State Legislature based on the federal bill offered by then Senator Obama to prevent the disenfranchisement of voters via deceptive practices. However, there are other laws already on the books, such as fraud statutes and existing Article 17 of the election law, which criminalize violations of the elective franchise. Tell us how you would protect the rights of voters.
Okay, Senator Schneiderman, I'll start with you.
Thank you. Voter protection is something that is very close to my heart. Look, the work I've done in Albany, and I actually, Richard was critical this morning, I always enjoy these debates. I learn a lot. It gives me food for thought. Got good lawyers up here. I do, however, think that the central focus of my work since I've been in Albany, of trying to take out a corrupt Republican machine that was running the state Senate for decades, has given me, has particularly well equipped me to face the challenges of riding the reform movement. And I agree with Sean. This is, believe me, this is the best time to be a reformer since certainly in the last decade that I've been fighting in Albany. I never 5 years ago, 10 years ago would have been able to convince my colleagues to let me chair a committee to expel an abusive, corrupt senator when we threw out Hiram Monster. We never would have passed the ethics reform bill we passed this year. And frankly, I agree with Sean that I think that voters being willing to throw out elected officials who don't do their job is the key. Voter outrage is up, good time to be a reformer. On the issue of election law, though, we barely scratched the surface of what we need to do. I've worked closely with a coalition of legal groups to try and expand enfranchisement, to try and expand registration, to reduce the requirements. Every bill, and the challenge is not in the Assembly where Richard and his colleagues pass a lot of good bills to expand the franchise and to reduce these supposed anti-fraud programs that actually are designed to prevent people from voting. We have a problem getting 32 votes in the Senate. We need to renew our commitment to that. I would suggest, though, that the issue of voter protection, this is one area where I do agree with those who call for change. The Attorney General's office can introduce program bills to reform this, but the Attorney General's office is, because of this Lefkowitz decision, really, it's a hard time enforcing election law. That's one area where I think we all support change, and I do think that that's something we can get through the legislature.
Okay. Sorry, Sean?
Well, I would look for ways to vigorously enforce those laws. I have some familiarity with voter protection. As a young lawyer, I did a lot of poll watching, and I'm proud of the fact that in November of 2008, I was on then Senator Obama's litigation SWAT team down in Washington, responsible for one particular voting machine in 3 different swing states. And certainly the run-up to that made it clear to me, and actually what happened on the ground that day, that vigorous enforcement of our voting laws is critically important because of the shenanigans that can take place to obstruct certain segments of the population from exercising their franchise. So I'm absolutely committed to that. If I can just talk briefly about the suggestion coming from Senator Schneiderman that folks who are running this year are talking about reform because it's something to talk about. Let me be clear. A few months ago, I was sitting where you are. I was fat, dumb, and happy in my corner office at Bernstein Litowitz. And but I was getting upset. I was getting upset about what was going on in my state. I didn't spend 30 years in uniform serving my country to watch the democracy in my home state disintegrate before my eyes. I've lived the American dream. I can afford to do this, but I also felt a duty to do it, a duty that I learned from my immigrant parents at the Naval Academy and through 26 years as a naval officer. Our state is hurting, and it needs new voices. And so I'm not a candidate who happens to have a reform agenda, because everyone's going to have one. I am running to reform. That is mission 1 for this Navy guy. That's why I'm doing it. I'm absolutely committed to it. I am independent. I'm committed to this. That's what I'm going to do, and I'm going to be very loud and noisy. In the last venue that I operated, Wall Street, I was a committed reformer, and I think if anyone looks fairly at the record I had on Wall Street, I was an agent of reform. Albany is a tough, tough place, but no tougher than Wall Street. And so I'm running because I want to reform. I'm not a candidate who happens to have a reform agenda.
Okay, before we continue, I'd like to just restate the question. I'm sorry, just in case you've forgotten, we're talking about voter disenfranchisement and deceptive practices and what you're going to be able to do from the AG's office.
The experience I bring to this are two. I was asked to run a campaign in a corrupt community, and I came up with a solution that solved the problem of voter fraud. I announced to the newspapers that we were going to have, at that time, Polaroid cameras in every polling place. It was very therapeutic. The second experience I had was running a team of 10 lawyers in Palm Beach County in 2000, and counting chads and supervising the taking of affidavits from people whose ballots were stolen from them. There is less of a place for lawyers in the prevention than there is for the remedy. But if the bad guys know, and this is the mixing of the two experiences, that there will be a presence on election day, the level of fraud will decrease. And therefore, the single best thing we can do is to make sure that the Attorney General's office is viewed as a place where proactive investigation of potential fraud takes place before and during election day. And the tough-minded prosecution can come later. That is a practical solution to the problem of voter fraud that I think would work in New York and elsewhere.
Time. Are you done?
Apparently.
Okay. Eric, Dinallo, to wrap it up.
I've campaigned in every county of this state, and the one thing I observed when I campaigned was a lack of legal resources across the state that I think is truly appalling. And I have proposed to reallocate some of the 700 lawyers in the Attorney General's office and put a presence of the AG's office in every county. And while I agree with Senator Schneiderman that Willie Lefkowitz made a mistake, it is still in my mind a violation of civil rights when people are disenfranchised and when they are defrauded in their right and ability to vote. And I would have a presence in some of these counties. The work that NYDLC has done is essential work, because there is nowhere for people to complain about the kind of activities that you help prevent. There is nowhere for them to go and observe in some of these Republican strong boxes in some of these states. There is absolutely no access and Democratic representation. So my contribution to this is to have presence, to balance the playing field, to have a place where all New Yorkers, instead of traveling over 100 miles to get to the nearest Attorney General's office, to have a place to complain and as Richard points out, to have a presence, a monitoring of what is a core civil and civil liberty and civil right. And I think the Attorney General's office could, with a completely straight face, protect, promote, and prosecute those kinds of wrongs. Willie Lefkowitz's mistake aside. But I want to emphasize that it should be statewide, it should be in every county, and it should not be anything but all-inclusive across all 62 counties.
Liz, can I mix up here just a little bit on one related point about voter access, voter rights?
Sure.
Imagine, if you will, that tomorrow, that on September 14th, everyone in New York gets to vote from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. except the people in Brooklyn. We're only going to give them from noon until 9 p.m. Can you imagine? People in Brooklyn would feel disenfranchised, that fewer people would vote. Well, guess what? That situation is currently the state of the law in our state. Most of the counties upstate, they're limited in their voting from noon until 9 p.m. And I'm telling you, fewer people vote as a result. There's just no way around it, particularly when they have to go longer distances from here. Now, I learned about this as I began to run for office. I wrote a letter to both Assemblyman Brodsky and Senator Schneiderman asking the abundant additional time they were spending in Albany while trying to do the budget, if they wouldn't mind introducing a bill to right that wrong. And I think, particularly what the organization here does, that is something that cries out for reform. Let's give the folks upstate the same ability and opportunity to vote as the folks downstate have.
Either you or Assemblyman Brodsky. Go ahead, Senator.
I'd be happy to respond to that. Again, this is something that those of us who've been working on voting rights issues have been aware of for some time. And Sean, I appreciated your letter asking that we mandate that all the counties in the state are on the same time frame. This is actually something that has been rejected by the folks upstate. I'm the sponsor of legislation to give counties the option to opt in. But it is something that, you know, believe it or not, different people have different views on the subject, and they didn't take kindly. In fact, a lot of folks view it as an unfunded mandate. In a lot of parts of the state, primaries are very low turnout. I appreciate philosophically what you're saying, but it's not something that some people want. I sponsor and I support legislation trying to give everyone who wants the opportunity to opt in. Any county should be able to, but it's, I think it's just, you know, this is another aspect of the stuff that those of us who've been engaged on the issues of reform in Albany have been looking at and working on for some time. Good to have your interest, but this is not a new issue. This is not, you're not the first one to raise it, so I appreciate your interest, but it is something that we've been looking at for a while. And I think actually something that certainly the people in the Democratic Lawyers Council who have been with us in races where things have been contested are been aware of for a long time also.
Assemblyman, are you satisfied with this? Would you have something to add, since it is?
Satisfied, no, but silent, yes.
Okay, let's move to the third ongoing question.